Hello, are you out there? I'm Mark with Redo Over, and we are playing Mu 2, Master of Orion 2, the old original from the late 90s. This is part 3 of our introduction series. We are looking at custom race. It says last race now. That's a nice trick where it'll store the last custom race you made, and you can just grab it and jump right through. But ultimately, when you are going to do a custom race, you must choose one of the character graphics types for who you want to play. Let's have some fun then. Let's do the Trilarians. I almost always go with Trilarians just because they're such a useless race, and if I choose them here as my custom, they can't appear in the galaxy with. I think we're going to have 3 or 4 other races we're playing with, but let's choose Trilarians. This is the stat species trait homepage. So let's start off by clearing it out. I hit the clear button down here. It resets and gives us 10 picks. You can see everything over here has a pick value. There's quite a few things, probably about 40 plus items here. You can right click on anything here to get a description. We right clicked on Rich Homeworld. It gives us a pop-up. Cost is 2 of our pick points. The homeworld of your race is mineral rich, producing a base 5 production per worker. I think that's opposed to a base of 3 production, so it's a pretty significant bonus. Rich homeworld and poor homeworld are mutually exclusive. That's right. Quite a few of these items are mutually exclusive. If we take rich homeworld, it turns bright green, and poor homeworld gets sort of... Oh, wow. Oh, you can't take... Oh, yeah. Well, it's sort of grayed out. You can't really tell that. Here, let's try a different one. If I do ship attack minus, then you can't take it with positive ship attack, if that makes sense. I'm just surprised, though. Usually it makes the color a little bit better to where... But it's not really doing it. But ultimately, you can't take ship attack minus 20 and ship attack plus 20. It's going to toggle it on and off. What you're noticing, though, is because I'm using up 4 of my picks, I lose the ability to get some of these more expensive ones. They're blacked out because I don't have the picks for them. Let's just hit clear real quick. I don't know if that was explained very well. If I take Tolerant for 10 picks, I use up all 10 of my picks, and you can see now that everything else is blacked out except for negative trait picks. That's right. You can take negative trait picks up to a total of negative 10. So we're going to clear this again. If we choose negative 10 trait picks, let's grab Repulsive for negative 6 and Feudal for negative 4. You can see we've now picked as many negative traits as we can, and it maxes us out at 20 picks. What happens if we try and pick more negative traits? You can see they've already blacked out. I can't just go to money now. Racial penalties are only allowed up to a negative 10 picks. I can't go further, you see? So the nice thing, though, about grabbing these two, Feudal and Repulsive, is that we now have 20 total picks. Now, if you wanted to play a challenge game where you don't assign any negative or positive picks, could I accept that? I could. Oh, so I'm going to hit the escape key. Will back me to the last screen. That's true for all the setup stuff. Any window that you're in, if you hit escape, you can move back to the previous window, all the way back to the beginning, which is a nice touch. If you notice, there's on these old games, there's no X. This wasn't made on a Windows, sort of setup, essentially. Windows existed, but it was pretty damn new back then. Windows 95 would have come out just before this, but at any rate. Long story short, if you wanted to challenge yourself, you could not assign any picks. You would just have average of everything. You'd have no special abilities, and all your other growth factors would be set to 0 or neutral, essentially. Or you could even take your 10 negative picks for a total of leaving 20 on the table, and that would be the most detrimental, impossible mode you could choose for yourself if you wanted to. I don't recommend it. It doesn't give a lot of flavor to your play, honestly. So let's hit clear one more time. So I think ultimately I may do short videos breaking down all of these different things. It's not graphically that interesting to look at. I guess the short video might have my face, and then I do the little pop-up window and read you the contents of this and explain it. in a 60-second video. I like doing shorts. They're fun. Gives you a lot of content. But in general, let's just talk through it real quick. I would recommend choosing up to 10 negative points ability modifiers. However, if you only say are choosing 18 positive picks, don't choose an extra -2 just for the heck of it. If you don't need to take a -2 to ship defense, don't do it. If there's not something you need more for the positive, for your pick total, don't mess with it. Don't detriment yourself for no reason. But let's talk in general about this real quickly. Ship defense, ship attack, both pretty obvious. Is the attacker, you, I think, always will go first in the game. Although on defense, I believe, well, maybe as the player, you always go first. Listen, I've always found that ship attack, having a bonus to it, is more beneficial than a ship defense negative. So if you need to get some negative points, ship defense -20, that's pretty reasonable. You can mitigate it with having a good offense. But in general, that's pretty straightforward. Ground combat is next to useless in the game. There's so many other ways. You can either just send a lot more Marines than the enemy. You can telepathically mind control an entire planet and win that way. You can also bombard a planet to ash so that it's completely barren. You just rebuild on it. Or you can even drop bombs up to a point. Oftentimes, your bombs in the game will take out ground defenders first, occasionally destroying a building, occasionally destroying a civilian pop. But if you're going up against really strong ground combatants, you can whittle them down a bit, kind of like half destroying the planet, then send your invaders in. Bottom line is never choose ground combat for anything except maybe the -2 points. It's useless, truly. Spine is important. However, there's ways to get +10s, +20s, or make up for a -10 on spine. So with that, there's a lot more leeway. I don't ever recommend taking a +10 or 20 to spine unless you're going to make an entire build around it. However, do be careful if you take that -10 points to spine for a -3 picks. That's a good negative to take. Don't take it with democracy, though, because democracy in particular already assigns your defensive agents a -10 penalty due to the emphasis on personal freedoms. It's actually pretty nice how they break all that out. So be cautious with spine and democracy, mixing those together. Governments, these really matter, and they're going to greatly flavor your gameplay. We might get into all of them in this video, but let's keep going with the more general stuff here. Population, this is big. Your most valuable resource in the game is your pops. Excuse me, is your population. Having it grow faster is going to give you just a massive advantage over other species. You will grow ahead of them quickly. Now, they can get technologies that will help them grow, but you'll always have this on top of them. And listen, for every extra farmer, every extra production or industrial worker, and every extra scientist you have, you're just that much better off. There's no other way to put it. Population is everything. But beyond that, farming, this is tricky. In late game, farming is negligible. You've solved your food issues by late game. But early on, having a +1 to food or +2 to food production is really helpful because it frees up your rare pop resources, your rare populations to do other more important jobs. Taking a minus to it, I wouldn't do it. I can't think of a reason you'd do it. And if you were to say be a lithivore and you didn't need food, you can't take food modifiers anyway, at least negative ones. So we'll hit clear again. Industry is really important. It's never going to hurt to have that +1 to production. I honestly would not recommend taking a -1 to production for any reason. It's not the hardest resource or the most valuable to get, but it's boilerplate. You can't do much else without it. So I wouldn't mess with it except to take a bonus. Science. Science is kind of, next to population, is the king of this game. Doing what's called a science rush. In the modern Master of Orion game off of Steam, it's hard to science rush. You can try and get as far ahead on science as you want to. It's not going to let you just win the game by the snap of a finger. It's really not. But in this game, if you run away with science, you are effectively a deity species within the game world relative to the others. You will just crush them. They can have 20 ships. You can have one ship in this game that can crush 20 enemy ships if the science differential is great enough. Bear that in mind. It's incredibly powerful. In Master of Orion, that's not the case. You have 20 little ships out there with missiles and stuff, and you launch them on a really powerful big battleship, there's a chance you're going to take out that battleship before it can take you out, even if you have a science advantage. But in this game, that's not the case. So science is king. Definitely take bonuses to it. I would not take minuses to it unless you've got a complete workaround. Like you're going to try and steal the technology or do charismatic trade deals on for the technology from others. And if you're going to do something like that, you would want to be playing with as many alien species as possible, probably in a large or huge galaxy with 7 or 8 other players, other species, not players, but you know what I'm saying, AI players, because you're going to want to be able to steal technology or trade technology from all those as much as possible. We're playing on a medium-sized galaxy with only 3 or 4 other players. Not a lot of opportunities not as many opportunities to steal or trade for technology, so we would not want to take that negative there. It's a very specialized thing. Finally, money, BC, stands for billion credits, or I like to call them galacto credits, or a lot of people now are calling them bitcoins, BCs, because hey, we're in the 21st century, baby. So that's an interesting one. The credits in the game, the BC, have a lot of uses. It allows you to buy stuff right away. Essentially, rather than you building it on your world, you're essentially buying it from a invisible galactic market, but it's the least efficient way to get anything, right? Does that make sense? It's really nice when you want to have a battleship next turn as opposed to 20 turns from now. If you have enough BC saved up, you can just buy it, you can have it. Gimme, 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 right? It's powerful. But generating BC means you've got to you've either got to tax your entire industrial base. So if you set your tax rate to 10%, that means every planet produces 10% less, but it goes into BC. So you see, it's kind of it's like a trade. You're converting your industry to BC, or with food, you get a half of one food gives you half of a BC. So that's even less efficient. So whether you're generating surplus food or you're converting your industry into trade goods, either way, it's a real roundabout way to get to BC. By the way, when you purchase something using BC in the game, I'll mention it here just so you understand. I believe you're purchasing it about 3 BC to 1 industrial production. So it's in that sense, when you do buy things rapidly, it's not a 1-to-1. If you built it yourself, you would build it at about 1/3 the overall cost is buying it outright using BC. So be cautious of that. BC are powerful, but they're not efficient. So in general, I usually don't play a lot of builds around BC generation because it just is a roundabout way to get to stuff when there are much more direct and more efficient avenues. And if economy is what you're playing for, BC ain't going to get it. So I don't fiddle with BC. You don't take a minus in it because it's going to cripple you. You do need to pay maintenance on stuff. That's where your BC really is most efficient, is maintenance. The more buildings you have and the more advanced the buildings are, the higher the maintenance costs. So be cautious with that. I think we'll stop episode 3 here. It will come back. We'll look at the governments, and then we may look at special abilities, although I think I may reserve those in particular for a short video. So that's it for now. If you watched, thank you so much. That's the end of part 3 of the introduction to Master of Orion 2 or Mu 2.